Hello everyone, welcome back to Gelvin Valley. We are continuing to do our fall tillage, and I'm excited because I think I finally have a fix for a little problem I've had in here. I know you've heard me comment multiple times in here that I'm a little distraught trying to carefully go around the edges here, which I'm trying to do at the moment without taking out the grass. I don't know. You know, it's one of those things. We got dirt on one side and then grass on the other. But as you can see now, we are cultivating on the edge and it isn't taking any of the grass out. I've done some study of the Lua code, and as it turns out, this is default behavior. This is how it's supposed to behave, you know, in the base game. And I had a dickens of a time trying to figure out why on my particular gaming session here that it was, you know, routinely scrubbing everywhere the cultivator touched would of course remove the foliage. And, you know, in real life, of course it would do it. Well, yes and no. Kind of it would, but kind of not. I think anybody that's ever worked a field knows the main body of the field is going to behave a little differently when it comes to cultivation versus the hardened headland area, you know, where it hasn't been traditionally tilled or that kind of thing. So yes, in real life it would take out a lot of the grass, but still, they wouldn't take it all out. But hey, this is a game. What I kind of was looking for or wanting was the ambiance of having the extra grass kind of just along the edge of the field and having it stay there. Because to me it looked weird, kind of like this area here, you see it over here, to have it denuded of foliage and gone. And, you know, having that gap between the grass and the field. And maybe that's realistic. I know my friend Russell made a suggestion, maybe it was the previous video to this one, to, I think it was him, or it was some idea I got to have it, you know, when it comes over this particular area, rather than, you know, because it's either one or the other. It will either destroy the grass or it will not touch it. That's kind of how it's set up. What I would like to do is, if grass appears in the field, then go ahead and destroy it. But if it appears over here, maybe just trim it. You know, we can, through a Lua function, have it go to the mode state, or at least I think you can do that. And that's something I'm kind of contemplating now, is how do I, you know, go to have it just be mode. And then of course you also have, I am never, I don't think on this map, I'm never going to choose this particular cultivator again. I forgot to show it up there at the beginning, but the fields in here are so steep and so variable in terrain, it's often spanning and it's leaving gapiosis, that's a technical term, under the cultivator, and it just doesn't look right. And it's doing stuff, you know, like this, swinging it like a pendulum. And it's because there's, look at that, I mean, it isn't even touching it. But in order to get to the edge, yeah, see, what I need is just a much narrower cultivator, I think, to have that look normal. So at least now it's, for the most part, leaving, you know, the foliage on the edge of the field alone. It's still taking a little bit, I think, because the pixel size, you know, it isn't perfect. Oh, goodness. Hang on there. Yeah, this is... It's, well, part of it's my own fault. Probably if I work these fields like how they would typically be worked, in the UK or Ireland, they would leave... Yes, that's just abominable. They would leave much more of a verge, or whatever you call it, kind of around the edge of the field. And it would be, I'd be out cultivating out here where it is flatter instead of the more varied terrain, kind of over on the edge. But anyway, because I have lots of foolish American ideas, I like farming clear over to the edge if I can. And I think I can if I have a smaller cultivator. So anywho, alright, it's telling me, yeah, I'm trying to, I don't know how many fields I have left. I know I have 37, 8, 47, 2, and 1. I believe those are the only ones left over. So I'm going to be glad to get this done. Probably everybody watching is going to be glad to have it done. Actually, something I haven't even checked in a while. Yeah, see, this is... Oh, my goodness. Never again. I'll do what I have to do it this particular time. But can you imagine how brutal this would be, like I've tried to do on all the other fields, trying to preserve the foliage at the edge of the field by... Yes, what's going on with that? I'm not even getting all of it on the field. And maybe some of it is, this is so doggone steep. Whatever. Can't get it all. Oh, yeah, see, and I'm slipping down the hill. That's part of the problem. Maybe if I get up the hill. See, this is just... You would never farm this in real life. Unless you were in Switzerland and only making hay. I don't think you would ever attempt arable farming on a hill that is steep. Unless you're in the Palouse, Eastern Washington, in the U.S. Yeah, see, even this isn't... There's something else going on, but I am glad to have this part fixed, so I don't have to be as careful going around, the outer edges. And as soon as I finish my round, I want to show just a little bit what I did. Sometimes I don't know how much interest there is in this. These older games, I may be one of the few still messing around with them, modding them, whatever. And so maybe people don't care, but some of these principles, I believe, would carry into even the later versions of the game. Oh, I guess I did clean all that off. Once I get the outer round done, and the rest ain't so bad. So, I think I was better handling this particular cultivator a long time ago. I used it a lot on Glen Ellie, which is another map I'm hoping to get to here at some point. Anyway, let me put on the parking brake, and I'm going to just hit this. We'll save, because that's what we do. And I'm going to hop out of game real quick, and I can maybe zip around it. No, it ain't letting me. Alright. First off, this is part of the study that I did was, with the cultivator, which I'm plowing, this is the engine that does things to the soil. All the code from here down to here. So, the arguments that this is all the underlying Lua code, start world XZ, width, height, and so forth. This defines the parallelogram, And the parallelogram, of course, is going to be, let me just go back in game. The parallelogram is a shape. It can be a rectangle that maybe defines the area of our cultivator, or sometimes a cultivator may have multiple parallelograms. Anything that's done to the soil in the game is defined through a parallelogram. So the definition, these are points, X and Z. Y points, of course, are up and down because it's all in 3-dimension. X and Z are, a traditional XY graph, if you will. X is across, I believe, and Z is up and down, laterally. Anyway, so that defines all those points, 3 points to define a parallelogram, and then you have these arguments down here, forced and forced. If forced is true, what that means is the cultivator is going to behave like a plow. If it's not forced, it's going to behave just as we were saying a little bit ago. It isn't going to create new fields, but this is where new fields, get created. And of course, we have a mod in there where we can create new fields using a cultivator. Traditionally, just with the way the game is, that's done with a plow down here. But even the plow has a forced, and I think, as most of us know, with a plow, you can actively choose. I think that's set up in the game whether you're going to create a new field or not. For the in-game cultivators without a mod, you don't have that choice. However, it is nice that a built-in the capability of doing so. So if forced is true, you're going to create new fields. Then there's common forced. And if this is true, it indicates what's going to happen in the common area and what all is going to get destroyed. If it's false, then the common area stuff, meaning all the crop foliage is, the decorative foliage is, or whatever that are defined in here, will not be destroyed. If it's true, then they will. And I believe most of the time this is true, or it will destroy it when it's in a field. More on that maybe a little bit later. When it's in a field, when you're outside of the border of the field, like we were just seeing in game, it isn't going to destroy the decorative foliage or any other foliage, including the grass or other crops, I don't think. Angle is something new that came, well, maybe we added in Farm Sim 13, I don't recall, but angle, I believe, is the angle that the cultivator is sitting. The game had pretty easy. It was 90 degrees, 45 degrees, and that was it. But some mod maps, maybe this one, I don't remember. I think this one, with Wild West's Gelvin Valley, I think it's multi-angle terrain. So the angle is fed in here to tell the script here which angle to use when it puts the changes to the soil. So all of these arguments are run through here. And I mentioned all that. The ones I was focused on here was forced and common forced, because I read the Lua code for the cultivator, and this would come in as false. You weren't forcing to create fields, and this would come in as true, I believe, and it would destroy those other foliages. So I was walking it through here, and of course one of the first things when you get into cultivator, one of the first things it does is it applies another utils function called update destroy common area. So it takes the same points in the parallelogram, and for some reason the giants, in all their wisdom, have a not. So whatever arguments here, it reverses it here But I studied the arguments going into update cultivator area, and it would send it in as false, which then gets turned into true. I don't know why they did it that way, why they didn't just say true or they meant true, but anyway, I digress. So we see that the first thing that's going to happen is here. The rest of this in here has to do with how the soil is modified. And really, in this version of Farming Sim, we had 3 versions of soil modification. You could plow it, you could cultivate it, or you could plant it. And then there were variations on top of that for the angle, which we just mentioned. So those could be at all different angles, depending on orientation with the map. Or you could spray. It'd be a little bit darker if it had the spray texture on it, or not. So, but this is all having to do with modifying the ground. What this is doing up here, destroying common areas, dealing with the foliage. So this modifies the dirt, this modifies the foliage. So to see what this is doing, we come down here. Update, destroy common area. So all of this is going to happen before we get to modification of the soil. So when you read this really, really closely, when this is coming in as true, which most of the time it is, limit to field, what this is doing, this limit to field, is it is saying, do we have dirt underneath us? And if we do, then apply this code, set density masked parallelogram. And this function will do the chosen effect only on a masked area. And the mask is back here. The mask used is detail ID, which of course is defined up here as the terrain detail. So this is the main surface of the map. So then it says anywhere with the terrain detail type channel, the first all the way to the end. Well, remember what we were just talking about with the types of dirt modification? I think channel 0, or the first one is cultivator texture, so that's going to be the first. Then the next is plow, and then the third is planted, and then the fourth, I believe, is the spray. Anyway, it's saying anywhere you find dirt texture, take this entry ID, which is the fruit layer, and here it's defining the specific parallelogram, and it's saying all channels, so no matter if it is just planted or if it's harvestable, when you run a cultivator over it and there's dirt underneath it, reduce this to 0. This is the final thing here that it says reduce it to 0, and it's gone. So this is masked when you're on the field. If you're saying let's do this off of the field, then it's a little bit different. You do the same thing we just did here, but instead of masking it for a particular area, you just use set density parallelogram, and you apply the value of 0 to that area, irrespective of what's underneath it. That's essentially, what's going on here. So it is picking the fruits, when you run a cultivator over it, and this is destroying all the foliage. This here is destroying the tire tracks, when you come over it. So when you cultivate, it's going to take out your tire tracks. And then there's one last iteration of code here for the dynamic foliage layers. These are for the short grass, the bushes that you see. Sometimes people have bulrushes, or jonks, I think they're called, whatever the mapper adds that gets added to the dynamic foliage layers. And I think we visited about this one other time, maybe, I don't recall. Anyway, this code does the same thing. If it's on a field, you take it out if there's dirt under it. If it isn't limited to a field, you take it all out wherever you find it. So this is what I was studying to try to say, hey, how come when I run this cultivator and go back in game, and I run this cultivator and it goes over the grass, it is ripping out the grass and destroying it? How come it is doing that when everything I'm seeing here is this is very carefully set up, and when I remove all mods, it follows all these distinctions, and it will not take out the foliage at the edge of the field. So when you read the code, I didn't know initially if the Giants had designed it that way. I didn't know, I got another mod in here called, this is German Felderkunning. I don't know how to say that, but this is the mod that we use, very simple and elegant. This is a mod that we use for a cultivator to allow us to create new fields. So it's setting it up using the cultivator's own variables and functions, if you will, to accomplish that. So I looked at this and I carefully followed these variables through the code, and I didn't see any way that this should be modifying or impacting the foliage at the edge of the fields. It just shouldn't. And as we proved, a little bit ago in here, I still have this mod in here and it's doing just fine. It is now leaving the foliage there. So as it turns out, it was a mod conflict. And let me see, can I just pull up? I have a bunch of mods in here. Everybody has a whole bunch of mods in here. I don't know what this is. 75, 100 mods, whatever it is. And I got a bunch of them ripped open here because, I'm working on them or whatever. So it's like, oh my goodness, it is so painful sometimes, especially when it's related to Lua, to figure out which mod is causing the conflict. All I knew is that when I eliminated all of them, everything worked normal. And so a lot of times what you can do to diagnose a problem is take half of your mods out, run the game, and see if you still have the problem. If you don't have the problem, then you know that the suspect mod is in the half that you took out. So meaning everything else in the error can be eliminated. So then you can pull the rest out, you bring the other half back in, and you do another half, and slowly by process of elimination you can get to the troublesome mod and figure out which one was doing it. Well, I kind of did that approach for diagnosis, and I kind of was suspecting a couple mods. I wondered about chop straw, but the chop straw mod was made by a very reputable modder. I didn't suspect it at first. And then you look at some of these others, skid steer, viable forest, front loader display, and you pull the code open on these. They have nothing to do with anything that impacts utils, destroy common area, or cultivation or anything. So anyway, to cut to the chase, the big problem happened to be in chop straw. And here's a huge problem modders can cause each other. And I just read an article on this here the other day. I think I am modder named Thunder, a very talented Lua scripter, and it was kind of on this concept. So in the chop straw mod, as some people would know, you have to do a 2A install. The map has parts of it installed so that it has the needed foliage areas, and then there is a script that you throw in your mods folder that activates it. And so there's a register Lua account, and as you can see up here, it's in the ZZZ chop straw. And this up here, what it's doing is it is registering the ability of combines to put it out and that kind of thing. And then they threw in some other things. It's kind of a dual purpose. It's impacting equipment, but then they said, while we're here, I think this is Yumi, he said, let's do a couple other things. So, as it turns out, his code is impacting destroy common area. And there's a way to do it that allows other scripts to work as intended, or the underlying game script to work as intended, and there's a way to circumvent that or not have it work. So you see what he's doing up here in the update, which runs every frame or tick of the game. He's doing something once, so when the game first turns on, it's going to run this code. So I'll skip this here, but this up here, he's making a copy of the existing code for utils update destroy common area. That's all this is doing. He's creating a copy. Then he says, all right, let's overwrite the underlying copy of the game with my new one. So here's the old one. You see, he has defined it as old. Here's the new one. So where's the new one? Well, he has it right down here. Here's his new function. All right, so we get in here. The very first thing he does is he runs the old one. Remember, he made a copy of it up here. So the old function as it was, he runs it as it was, feeding it all the necessary. This is the parallelogram, remember. And then he says, all right, this is within the new one, run the old one, now run these. And so, as everybody knows that has worked, with chop straw, this then allows the cultivator or the plow or whatever to take out the chop straw textures. So it's really handy. He's just putting it right into the update destroy common area, which means he doesn't have to add a specialization to the cultivators to do it or anything like that. This is good code harnessing the power of the game to do something in addition, namely taking out the chop straw. Of course, I fiddled with it later too. When I added fire material, I put the added here. I am now harnessing, modifying an existing mod, to have another layer for the blackened earth, or in this case here, you may remember a couple episodes ago, briars material. But there was one teeny tiny mistake in here, and this is where diagnosis in mods can really be problematic and it, cause you to pull your hair out. First, let's go back here. Update destroy common area. All right, we see this start world XC. We see the whole parallelogram, and then there's this item here, limit to field. When I looked at this, for whatever reason, the code dropped this particular variable. He had it stopped right here at the parallelogram. So what it means is limit to field was nil, meaning whenever this function was called, even though there would be a true for limit to field, it would just get dropped because there was nothing to take it in. And if you go to the code over here, what happens if this is nil? All right, it starts right here, the very first line, limit to field utils get no nil. It's not going to allow it to be nil, but if it is, make it false. So, false is limit to field, which means it isn't going to mask it, it's now going to destroy everything. And this is exactly what was happening in the code, as we were destroying all the foliage. Now, like I say, maybe nobody cares about all that, but this is what I had to do to fix it because I still want to use, the chop straw mod. And the fix was very, very simple. All I had to do, was add the variable. And then every time the function is called, this variable comes in, it's going to get used, it's going to get passed along to the old one, and everything will update just fine like we were seeing in game. But this article that I'm referring to that Modder Thunder wrote kind of talked about this concept, and he was basically making a plea to modders, to Lewis scripting modders in particular, and saying, hey, be responsible when you make your mods and don't have sloppy code. Now, I'm not a coder, so a lot of this flies over my head. But here is an area that I believe is in the spirit. He says take responsibility, meaning when you make a change to a base game function that every other mod and vehicle depends on, make it in such a way that everybody else can continue to use it, or other mods can call it and it will make their modifications too. And by eliminating this particular variable, it stopped this mod and limits everything else. This mod, meaning the Chop Straw mod, limits anything else from working the way it should. And so, yeah, I'll have to see if I can locate that article. I maybe should link it. It was a really good read, a good reminder. And like I say, a lot of it is over my head. It is so easy, for someone like me in particular, because I am not a coder. It's easy for me to hard code something that maybe should be, coded differently. For example, an example of hard coding, you take fruit util chop straw. What this is right here is actually a number. I don't know what number is, but let's say it is fruit number 35. So you could make this script work by replacing this with the number 35. And in our particular situation, it'll work fine. But depending on the situation, the next map you go to, maybe Chop Straw is mod number 38 instead of 35. Well, now because you've hard-coded it 35, it isn't going to work. As a matter of fact, it'll have a disastrous result. So by taking the extra work and putting it in the actual representation of the number, this is going to go grab the proper number, whatever it is, every time and in all cases. So it's good for me to think about that, because it's easy to be sloppy, lazy when writing the code and stuff, and make it hard and not transferable, if you will, to other situations. And if it's something I'm only making, for my own use, and it isn't going to be a mod, that gets released or whatever, well then, no harm, no foul. I can hard code it all day long or be as lazy as I want. For example, in here, I have my Sky Swap mod, which I built for Farm Sim 17. And in Farm Sim 17, I went through a ton of effort to make sure it worked, in a multiplayer setup and everything. Well, when I took the code back to Farm Sim 15, I know the multiplayer functionality is destroyed. It isn't going to work. But I don't particularly care, because nobody wants it. I ain't going to be releasing it, so it's only going to be used in here, and it works fine for what I need. So anyhow, I don't know if that was of use to somebody out there, but that's the little modding journey I just took related to update or the utils destroy common area, which is what's going on underneath our cultivators and plows. And now the foliage at the edge of the map will survive. So anyway, thank you so much for sticking around to watch. I'm going to keep on cultivating in here. Oh, this is terribly steep. And I will see you on the next one. Goodbye.